Good evening and welcome to Scientists for Labour's first event of the 2020 conference season. It's a pleasure to see so many of you joining us today. And to kick off our round of discussions, debates and talks this week, we're delighted to welcome Dr. Gordon Brown. So by way of introduction to Scientists for Labour, we're a socialist society affiliated to the Labour Party and have been working during the coronavirus crisis to make sure that the party's policymakers have access to the latest news and results in scientific research and development. We've been doing that through producing daily briefings on the latest research published on COVID and related topics, and also in-depth focused reports on issues like inequality, education, and test, track, and trace. This event tonight is being hosted by Scientists for Labour, and if any of you are more interested in our work, you're more than welcome to either look at our website, which will be a link put in the chat now. We're happy to take members from anyone who's interested in science or technology, whether professionally or personally, and we're always looking for more volunteers to help with producing our reports for MPs and peers. This event is being recorded, just so that you know, and you're welcome to put contributions in the chat. The plan is to run for about 45 minutes tonight. Gordon will say a few words, we'll have questions from myself on behalf of Scientists for Labour, and then questions from the floor. Please do bear in mind to make sure that all questions are kept professional and comradely at all times, and anyone displaying behaviour otherwise will unfortunately be removed. Before we move on to introducing Gordon, we'd like to share with you videos from 3 eminent scientists and science policymakers about the campaign that we've been working on over the last few weeks with Gordon, with Sir Paul Nurse and many others to ensure that the UK continues to have access to the EU funding programmes like Horizon, knowledge exchange programmes like ERASMUS+, and regulatory programmes like EURATOM. So that will take 2 or 3 minutes, and Joe will just be sharing that up now, and then we'll move forward to talking to Gordon.
Over the last 30 years, European science as a whole has strengthened hugely, and we have more collaborations in our science with Europe than with any other region. And that's why it would be such a real own goal if we were to jeopardize this by cancelling our collaborations. This is true over the whole of science. It's especially important in health and biological sciences, but I speak as a so-called big scientist, and of course the European collaborations, like in particle physics and in space and astronomy, have made Europe a world beater, and we don't want to lose the benefit we have from these collaborations, and they indicate how much there is to gain if we strengthen these collaborations, and so that's why I was delighted to support this letter.
Hello, my name's Alison Woolard and I'm a geneticist at the University of Oxford. My university currently has well over 100 million euros in research funding from the European Research Council, as well as over 200 million euros from Horizon 2020. European funding has been an amazing deal for UK science. Royal Society data suggests we have got 50% more back than we put in. But it's not just about the money. In my university, there are over 2,000 EU nationals who are valued members of staff. Around 25%, in fact, of research staff are EU nationals. Will they still want to come after the end of the transition period? 2 of my current graduate students are EU nationals, paying the home EU fee for their tuition. Neither of them would have been able to come if they'd had to pay the much higher overseas fee, but they're both doing world-leading science. And it's not just about EU nationals coming to the UK. It's about cross-national collaboration, the free exchange of expertise and ideas, so much easier without borders. International collaboration is so much part of the fabric of science that we scientists tend to take it for granted. We've all worked throughout our careers in overwhelmingly international environments, and we love it, not just because of the catalyst this provides for our research, but also because of the cultural advantages. International partnership, collaboration and friendship, such as we see in science, is a shining beacon of hope for humankind. Let's not cut ourselves off from this. That would be utter folly.
Recognise that ERASMUS has been a tremendous success, and it has created a generation of Europeans who understand each other much better than before. And, you know, like the Edinburgh Festival is about people from different countries understanding each other. ERASMUS is about that as well, creating a generation of Europeans who at least have spent half a year in another member state or another European country, thus starting to understand the differences and learning more about themselves in the process.
Thank you, Joe, for sharing that with us. So without further ado, it's a pleasure to introduce Dr. Gordon Brown for Scientists for Labour's largest ever event. And I hope that you'll all enjoy both what Gordon has to say in the discussion that we'll get going, and we'll take the time to get stuck in to our campaign afterward. Gordon was Prime Minister of the United Kingdom from 2007 to 2010. And in addition to being a tireless advocate for research and development, he's also put in place many programs that have supported Britain's scientists, their families, their communities, and the universities and academic institutions that we depend on so greatly today. It's a pleasure to welcome him here, and we look forward to hearing everything that he has to say. Without further ado, Dr. Gordon Brown.
Ben, first of all, let me start by thanking Scientists for Labour for the work you've done in analysing the COVID data, reporting daily and now weekly on what it means, exposing failures where governments have made failures, helping Keir Starmer not just be such an effective leader of the opposition, but as he has had to be, a very effective leader of the prosecution to secure the best support for the British people. And thank you too for the work your members do every day and every year, demonstrating the importance of science and exposing how wrong the Michael Goves of this world have been to say that the country has had enough of experts. In late October 1963, shortly before his premature death at the hands of an assassin, President John Kennedy delivered a speech on the importance of science. He said he could imagine no period in the long history of the world where it would be more exciting and rewarding than in the field today of scientific exploration. He said he recognized that with each door that we unlocked, we see perhaps 10 doors that we never dreamed existed, and therefore we have to keep working and moving forward. And if that was true 60 years ago, it is even more true today. And I want to start, having heard these great introductory statements from Lord Rees, from Alison, and from Frans Timmermans, I want to start by acknowledging the work of another great British scientist, Tim Berners-Lee, a good friend of mine, who gave the web to the world, making in April 1993 the source code of the World Wide Web available to all. And the first observation I want to make is that this invention was made available right round the world, free of charge, on a royalty-free basis. Not only getting software to people that has transformed the life of hundreds of millions, but then Tim has gone on with his foundation to expand access to the 90% of the world who had not had access before his work started. And his gift to the world was in the tradition of Jonas Salk, who 70 years ago not only developed the polio vaccine, but just like Tim, made it available free to all. And when Jonas Salk was asked who owned the patent, he replied, the people. He said, I would say there is no patent. You might as well ask, could you patent the sun? It was these inventions, the people's web, the people's vaccine, two gifts that kept on giving, saving lives and communicating, us being able to communicate instantly around the world. But the Berners-Lee invention had another feature that he would be the first to acknowledge, and this is what I want to concentrate on today. He worked at CERN. He benefited and acknowledged that he benefited from great international cooperation, from scientists all over Europe and some from all over the world. And as Tim Berners-Lee believed, we are in a community of scientists who cooperate together and work together. You might say we cooperate out of need, but I say also we have a human need to cooperate. And just think of another great scientist who's been helping us in our endeavors to save Horizon for Britain, Paul Nurse, who's written in support of this event tonight and will have a letter appearing in Nature with us later this week. Not content with his Nobel Prize winning discoveries, explaining how cells control its cycle of growth and division, he has gone on to create the Crick Institute, what is becoming the internationally renowned research centre for collaborative work on cancer based here in London, but with researchers, scientists, medics from every single part of Europe and all over the world. And so both Tim and Paul are missionaries for cooperation in science. They're arguing that we must work together. They are determined to work in collaboration with others. And is this not the essence of what science is about today? As President Kennedy said in that speech, science of necessity becomes more involved with itself, but also it becomes more international. The great scientific challenges, he said, transcend national frontiers and national prejudice. There has always been true, for the language of science has always been universal. And perhaps scientists, he said, have been the most international of all professionals in their outlook across the world. Now we think of the transformative role of British scientists, Alexander Fleming, his discovery of penicillin, James Watson and Crick of the Crick Institute on the DNA, providing the basis for molecular biology. From the cloning of Dolly the sheep, here where I am in Edinburgh, but at the Roslin Institute, of course, to Higgs' discovery at CERN some years ago, and he too lives in Edinburgh. All cooperating internationally to make these discoveries and inventions, all these inventions happening because we collaborate together. And so think of the challenges we now face together. Finding a cure to the pandemic. We have still no solution, no vaccine, not the right therapeutics, a lot of work still to be done. We have yet to find a cure to malaria. We have yet to find a solution to cancer. We have yet to find a way through climate change. We have yet to find the solutions to the decarbonization that we want to see. We have yet to find ways to maintain biodiversity. Right across the world, problems that we need solved, and scientists, we need to solve them. The world's seas and oceans are indivisible. We all breathe the same air. An event in one part of the world affects every part of the world. We need and must work together. And it's for these reasons that I want Britain to associate to Horizon, the European programme. Of course, it will also improve our productivity. David Sainsbury, who was the greatest Minister of Science we've ever had, has a new book called Windows of Opportunity, which I recommend because it shows that productivity has grown so slowly in Britain in the last decade that if we are to grow, if we are to provide employment, if we are to provide wealth for our people, we need to do something about it. Not least because our most productive sector has been halved in size, and that's North Sea oil, but also because low value added services have been the biggest employer, a bigger employer than high value added manufacturing. And we have to find a way to harness the power of innovation, as he says in his book, to create modern manufacturing strength, which is good for exports, good for the regions, good for creating jobs for a new and skilled workforce. Now, today, as we face leaving the European Union, and we can argue about that during the course of our discussions, we face the possibility of leaving the science and skills programs, Horizon, and of course, ERASMUS+, as well as the European Investment Bank. And you know how many people have opposed this. All the universities of the United Kingdom who benefit from Horizon, the Royal Academies who know the value of Horizons, the science charities who are involved with every scientific activity that happens in the United Kingdom. And according to a poll, the general public, 70% and more of the general public, whether they are for or against Brexit, want us to stay in Horizon. And there are good reasons why. Horizon has provided nearly 80 billion of funding over 7 years. And the UK has secured at first about 13.5% of that. And the Horizon programme is being extended as a European programme to a 100 billion programme over the next 7 years. And it would be terrible if we were not part of that. While Britain is creating its own research agency, like the Defence Agency for Research in America, and investing in it, they propose billions modelled on the US DARPA. The issue, however, is that being in Horizon is not an alternative to a British programme, but a complement to it. Imagine the other countries outside the EU who are involved and associated with Horizon. Norway, Switzerland, Israel. Quebec is even applying to join from Canada. Of course, we couldn't get the same terms outside the EU as inside the EU. But the Wellcome Trust and others have proposed a system where while we receive a higher share now of monies relative to our scientific investment, we can at least secure most of the contribution we make in return. You see, the EU Science International Framework cannot be replicated nationally for two reasons. First, nation-state only programs cannot compete with international programs for the opportunities that are given for mobility of scientists, collaboration, sometimes competition, and certainly for career prospects. And certainly science research is about long-term planning. It requires the sharing of risks and resources to be most effective. Science projects can last several years, sometimes decades. Science projects need certainty so that they can plan for the future. And Horizon has given Britain a certainty over the last 10 years, and it should do so in the future. So we know that to achieve an expansion in scientific activity in Britain, we need to work together. And we know from experience what it means. I just want to end by talking about one scientific program that shows the value of cooperation. Not a Horizon program, but an international program that tells us how much science can change the world. For 30 years, you know, Russia and America fought each other in outer space. One to get to the moon, the other following behind. Then in the 1980s and 90s, after 40 years of battling each other, they realized that the only way to make progress in space was to work together. Hence, they created the International Space Station. Russian astronauts, American astronauts, so many nations represented with a scientific genius there together. It is such an interdependent project that even when Russia and America are at war or in difficulty over other issues, Russian scientists are up there in the science station benefiting from American technology, and American scientists cannot get to that space station without using Russian technology. We are so interdependent, and if international cooperation can work there in one of the most sensitive areas for peace in the world, surely we can make it work in Europe. You know, when Ronald Reagan met Mikhail Gorbachev in the 1980s, and this was just before the famous Reykjavik summit when they agreed on a massive nuclear arms reduction. Ronald Reagan, who was really interested in Star Wars himself as a former filmmaker, said, if we were hit, he said to Gorbachev, by an asteroid in America, would you come to help us? And Gorbachev said, of course. And Reagan said, we too. And it is that sort of we tooism we now need in science. Think of what we've achieved in recent years. We dealt with the ozone layer. We helped reduce HIV/AIDS. We eliminated smallpox. We're on the way to eliminating polio. We've made huge strides in eliminating other diseases, particularly those in Africa. We are going to find a cure and a vaccine for COVID-19. If this is what we can achieve, think of what more we can achieve by continuing to cooperate together. I commend the project and the proposal we have to campaign to stay in Horizon and to make sure that Britain doesn't lose the benefit of Europe, and Europe, in this case, does not lose the benefit of Britain. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gordon, for those contributions. I'm sure your words will be echoed and resound with many people in this call. I'm sure many of them have indeed benefited from those projects themselves, and it's welcome to hear you speaking on that and supporting our campaign. To go next, I'd like to invite Henry Stannard, who has been working with Gordon, to say a few words about the campaign itself and why our group believes that this is an important step forward for the United Kingdom and indeed for the European Union. Henry, please.
Good evening, everyone. I'm afraid I'm not going to be able to match Gordon for eloquence or vision on that. But I think just a couple of words on what the campaign is, and in particular why we think, or why Gordon and Lord Sainsbury think it could be successful. I think, first of all, the way that the government has framed this campaign, the way the government frames Horizon, is it's about money. Ultimately, we put an amount of money into Europe, and we get an amount back. It used to be 60% more than we put in. Now it's a little bit more than we put in, but it's really about money, and we can always replace money. We can borrow it so little, we can always replace money to replace Brexit. And the same with the farmers, the same with the judiciary, the same with everything else. I think our argument, and the argument from talking to many scientists like you, is that it's not about money. It's about people, and it's about organisations. Fundamentally, Horizon money is about 5%, if that, frankly, of the total of UK's total R&D spend of 35 billion. What Horizon gives the UK is, first of all, access to talent. I think if you look at the names of the people who are currently even researching the coronavirus vaccine, many of them came from European universities. If you think about the number of scientific submissions to research journals every year, half of them are made in collaboration between UK researchers, or researchers based in the UK, and researchers based in continental Europe. And that has allowed the UK to become, in my job in the process, I can say it's now a global superpower in R&D that far punches above its weight, both in this programme, where the UK is the leading recipient of funds, the leading, does more projects than anywhere else, and outside this programme as well. And so that access to talent, that access of people who, the people mobility of researchers who want to come to the UK, make their lives in the UK, and are confident that they will get funded in the UK, is critical. Secondly, it's what it funds, not how it funds. Ultimately, a lot of R&D funding now, as I'm sure you're all aware, is tied up in pretty incremental research and development. If you look at pharmaceuticals, there's a lot of new drugs that come out with far lower market sizes, far lower kind of incremental innovation than was the case, say, 20 or 30 years ago. What the Horizon funds, Horizon is deliberately set up, the European Research Council is deliberately set up to fund discovery stage R&D, the stuff that gets 11 times return on investment over very many years, the stuff that frankly most companies won't put money into, most universities aren't big enough to put money into, and most countries even don't feel confident enough to put money into. So it's the people, it's the type of research, and then finally it's the jobs and organisation. Who are the top three, well, who are certainly three of the top 5 corporate recipients of Horizon funding? It is Rolls-Royce, Airbus, and Jaguar Land Rover. Now, the research budget that they get from Europe, the ability to be in Horizon Europe, then funds manufacturing jobs further down the line. This is not about the 10,000 researchers who are funded by Horizon, or the 19,000 indirect jobs that are funded by Horizon. This is about the many tens of thousand jobs down the line that you can get out of Horizon. And so we know that it's worth a lot to the UK. We know that there's a lot of public support for Horizon. I think Gordon talked about the Best of Britain polling. This is not a Leave Remain issue. This is in general. People believe, 70% of Brits believe that everyone benefits from joint working. 70% of Brits or more believe that we should continue to stay part of Horizon, continue to cooperate and collaborate with our European partners across these initiatives. So this should not be a money issue or a Leave or Remain issue. This is a science and the future of the UK issue, where really the request on associate member status is making the UK like any other country in Europe that is not in the EU. Now, this is not just a EFTA issue. Israel's in this, as Gordon's already said. Ukraine's in this. Armenia's in this. This is not about joining a kind of Norway for now solution to the EU problem. This is totally different. And what we know is that it's incredibly important over the next 6 months that this is resolved. We know that The funding decisions are going to start being made next year. We know that a lot of the funding is going to be front-loaded because of the incremental COVID stimulus that's going into this funding. And we know that without continued membership of associate status, the projects and the teams that are currently running on Horizon now will not get that replacement funding and will be dissipated. And we know also, and I hate to make this a sort of immigration issue, that ultimately, without that associate member status, you are putting a lot of scientists into the hands of the Home Office, where we know that the Home Office are trying to put very high minimum income thresholds onto people coming into the UK that many universities can't match. And we know that scientists already have been caught up in visa issues that would have been totally, would never have happened 5 years ago from outside the EU. So for all of those reasons, we think that it is really important that the UK stays in Horizon, but that we talk about it as a people, organisations, jobs, rather than simply money. Money can be replaced, but people can't be in science.
Thank you, Henry, for those contributions. Again, I'm sure many of our listeners will agree with much, if not all, of what you had to say. Gordon, a couple of questions from myself before we move on to questions from the audience. This is obviously an issue that you feel very strongly about. I was wondering if you might be able to share with us why you think that this is such a priority for action at the moment. Time is running out. Why do you believe that this is what we should focus on? And furthermore, what would you like the people in the audience to do? I think we're all very much willing and able to engage with this issue, both personally and or professionally. What would be the best route to action?
Yes, and Henry's put it very well. This is about our economic future. It's about jobs. It's about innovation in industry. It's about the future of manufacturing. So for all these reasons, I think we should support being part of Horizon. It would, of course, be associate status and not full membership. But as we have said, many other countries outside the EU are members too. I'll be honest, I want this still to be a bridge to Europe. I want us to be in a position where we can say, well, at least we have contact with our European friends, as Frans Timmermans was wanting as the Vice President of the European Commission to retain, and Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland. Of course, Scotland and Northern Ireland voted to stay in Europe, and I think it would be a bridge for them to the European Union. So we maintain the links where they're in the interest of our jobs, in the interest of skills, and in the interest of infrastructure investment, like perhaps a joint venture with the European Investment Bank. And I think that would make a difference. What we'd like you to do is to sign petitions to ask the government to change its mind. The Science and Technology Committee, chaired by Greg Clark in the House of Commons, is reviewing this issue, and they would welcome submissions, and we already have a few. Letters are going into the press. Nobel Prize winners are signing a joint letter very soon. And anything that as individuals you can do to get your friends to write in or to be part of a petition would really make a difference. I think in particular from the north of England, if where all the Conservative seats won at the last election, they're worried about. I think if members of Scientists for Labour or members of the community who are in these areas were to protest to their local MPs and say, look, it doesn't make any sense for my local university to be cut off from Horizon. It doesn't make any sense for businesses like British Aerospace to be cut off from Horizon. I think that would make a difference too. So there's a huge number of things that we as individuals can do by letters, by petitions, by submissions to the Select Committee, by submissions to the government itself. And we will be helping coordinate this over the next few months. We've already had regional launches of the Horizon case. We've done it and are doing it for the ERASMUS case. We're going to do it also for the European investment case. So I think we can make a difference. We make this an issue, let's be honest, about whether you're for or against the European Union. Are you for skills? Are you for science? Are you for innovation? Are you for our economic future? And that's what Horizon is really about.
Thank you. On the note that you just picked up there about the regional campaigns, obviously it's been highlighted that the disparities in funding provided by the UK government centrally are in some ways made up for by some of the European Union's structural funds and indeed those of the European Commission. What would you say that the risks are to the devolved nations of the United Kingdom, or indeed areas in England outside the so-called Golden Triangle of London, Oxford and Cambridge, if we cannot maintain associate or grant associate status of Horizon? And what impact would that have on the soft skills, the transferability of employment of researchers, especially younger early career researchers today?
Well, Henry may want to add something on this because he's done a huge amount of work on this, but it is clear to me when we published the list of grants and support that have been given to the individual regions of this country and to Scotland, Wales and to Northern Ireland, we found that many, many universities were benefiting, many companies were benefiting. And so just as the European structural funds, the regional fund and the social fund has benefited areas like Liverpool and Newcastle and Belfast and Wales, the science programme is benefiting universities in some of the regions and nations that we've been talking about this evening. So there is a great boost to regions and nations by association with that European programme. And that is something they don't want to lose. But just remember, Frans Timmermans was speaking as Vice President of the European Commission. It's something that the European Commission doesn't want to lose. So there will be a welcome for Britain if we want to join ERASMUS, but also Horizon, or a joint venture with the European Investment Bank. And these are arguments to be made for the sake of jobs.
Thank you. And one final question for myself. So in the meantime, please do keep contributing from the audience to the chat. I was wondering if we could get your take on what's happened lately in terms of both coronavirus, the relationship that the UK has with the European Union has obviously had some influence on coronavirus research, as the letter you just mentioned alluded to, but also in terms of the claims that have been reported that some of the Prime Minister's actions risk undermining the withdrawal agreement and thereby influencing, if not removing, some of the freedoms for scientific researchers that we all thought were already assured.
Well, first of all, the good news. The good news, I think, is that Britain will contribute to the COVID-19 vaccine programme. It's already made a number of announcements. I understand a further set of announcements are going to be made very soon. And even if America doesn't participate in this programme, which would be very bad news, Britain will, and the rest of Europe has already said it will, and other countries outside Europe are going to participate too. So some of our great British scientists have been involved in the search for a vaccine. They're also involved in this group of people that are trying to improve therapeutics, and also, of course, involved in the groups of people who are also trying to improve the supply of medical equipment so that poorer countries, as well as the richer countries, can get the benefits of the technological advances. So I'm hopeful that we will have this COVID group that will finance the vaccine so it's available right around the world. And then Gavi, which I was involved in for many years, the Global Alliance for Vaccines and Immunization, they will be in a position then to distribute it to some of the poorest countries and some of the poorest people in the world. So that's good news. The bad news is, I think, that we've taken a step backwards in our negotiations with the European Union that makes any, if you like, agreement that is harmonious more difficult. And I think what happened in the last 10 days is that for some reason the government thought that they could increase pressure on the European Union by threatening to break away from a treaty they'd signed only a few weeks ago. And so somehow our lawmakers, Parliament, they're now being asked to become lawbreakers. And it's something that I just don't think around the world, in America, in the rest of the world, in Europe, is understood as being even acceptable as a tactic for negotiation, far less a long-term outcome by abandoning some of the withdrawal agreement. My own view is that this is a negotiating tactic and that's failed. I don't think they expected the reaction they did, that I think they will pull away from it. The worry I've got is that we might have just a minimalist agreement. So by the end of the year, there might be an agreement. Remember, this treaty is running to about 700 pages as a document for negotiation. And perhaps we'll end up with a pretty poor compromise that while we will get tariff-free trade, we'll have a threat from the European Union that if we break the level playing field and set lower standards, that they will sanction us and they will they will, in a sense, remove the benefits of tariff-free trade if we do that. So you could end up with what may be a really bad scene where you've got uncertainty for years about what really is going to happen to this trading relationship. And of course, in the situation of there being a minimalist agreement, you might not get the progress on Horizon and Erasmus that we want. But that's why it's all the more important for us now to campaign on Horizon, to say that we need it, to tell people that you mustn't allow the disagreements over one part of the agreement to prevent us making sure that we can maintain our relationship with Horizon, Erasmus, and other institutions that really are important for jobs in the future of Britain.
Thank you. So we'll now move to a few questions from the chat. Obviously, in terms of discussing this in lobbying or indeed in speaking to friends, family and colleagues, one thing that often comes up is, you know, what the alternative is, what would happen if we were to lose access to these programs. Could you perhaps say a few words both on the sort of general outlook for the UK, but also in terms of some of the practical difficulties that you think as a former academic may come about if we are unable to secure some form of UK participation in these funds that you've just mentioned?
Well, I think Henry can add more to me. Alison, I think, brilliantly described the problems that we faced at the beginning. Immigration problems, the flow of scientists, the mobility of scientists, the ability to have long-term agreements that can advance scientific research, the uncertainty that arises from that. All these are real problems if we don't have associate membership of Horizon. And while I know Dominic Cummings, who's the person who's forcing this new DARPA, this is something similar to the American Defense Research Agency, onto Britain, wants to put lots of money into it, I think he will find that once you lose the ability to cooperate and to have common collaboration and to have the interaction and to have the dialogue, or you lose at least some of that because you're not part of programs that other people are joining in collaboration together, then that is a big disadvantage for British science. And I think Henry summarised some of that, and he may want to add to it, and I would ask him to add to that now.
Of course. I mean, I think that you would get you'd get three things happen pretty quickly. I think without continued collaboration as an associate state country in Horizon, you would have, first of all, capital flight, in particular from the regions. I think it's very clear that this government does not know where the scientific base this country is. I think you saw that in how the testing program was started up, where so much of it, all of the voices that they were talking to were coming from the kind of golden triangle of research, none from the regions. I think it's very unlikely that the government would know who to talk to or how to fund research in, for example, Northern Ireland, where pretty much every program is funded by Erasmus. So you'd see a flight of the capital base of UK R&D funding. Secondly, you would see a flight of talent. Without that money, without that collaboration, without, frankly, that immigration status, I think you'd see a flight of very good researchers, both, and I would say this is not just European research, this is UK researchers going elsewhere, going where the money is, going where actually they can collaborate with their peers, going where it's easiest to work in the style to which they've become accustomed. And then you would see a flight of companies as well. There is a reason why AstraZeneca chose to have its largest global campus in Cambridge. It's because it had access to all the talent pool that comes out of the Golden Triangle. There's a reason why Jaguar Land Rover is doing all of its research in the Northwest, because it's pretty confident that there is a base of researchers there, and a kind of scientific base and a university base that it can start to work on. So this is not about, we lose the money, but it can be replaced and it might be a bit of a hiccup. This is, you lose the entire basis for investing money in the first place, in particular in the regions which need it most and which rely on it most. Ultimately, research in the Golden Triangle, those universities do not rely as much on Horizon research as Queen's University in Belfast, for example, or as the University of Glasgow, the University of Edinburgh, who rely a lot more on Horizon funding and who rely on Horizon to find the projects where the UK government then matches funding as well. So I think it's, both funding flight from the regions, but then also talent flight, then corporate flight, which means jobs flight. I think that's the narrative that I would say there.
Thank you, Henry and Gordon, for your contributions. Another question from the chat is, obviously we talk about engaging and interacting with the government here in the UK, or indeed in the devolved nations, but part of the agreement will of course be contingent on what the European Union through the European Commission wishes to move forward on. What's the best way of engaging with that to ensure that the Europe First approach, as much as it's understandable, disadvantages the UK as little as possible?
I think Wellcome Trust and a group of science charities put a very detailed proposal only a few days ago that would be a negotiation with the European Union about our association to the Horizon programme, and we'd have to accept that we would not get all the advantages that we had when we were full members of the European Union, but I think they put forward pretty good proposals that would allow us to get the benefit of our investment, but also the benefit, as Henry said, not just of money, the benefit of collaboration, the benefit of cooperating together. So if I was wanting to make a proposal to the government, I would ask them to look at the Wellcome Trust and the other science charities proposals. And I think they have been supported by Universities UK. I think they're supported by the Royal Academies as well. So there's a huge amount of scientific pressure behind this. And there's not a scientist I meet who says that we're better out of Horizon. Everybody says that even if Britain is going to expand its own science programme, you need the benefits of cooperation by working together, and you should not lose them.
Indeed, and I hope that many on the call will heed your call to take action on this issue as we move forward. So another question, we often talk about science as a consequence of politics, in the sense that the scientists are recipients of decisions that politicians make. But it's been pointed out in the chat that science can in and of itself be a tool for enabling greater collaboration between countries where political collaboration and cooperation doesn't yet exist. You cited the example of Russia and the United States, which is perhaps one of the most famous, but there are certainly many more throughout Europe as well, perhaps during the Cold War period. How can we continue to push forward those collaborations and make clear to our colleagues in the European Union and more widely that we are still open for business in terms of collaboration and cooperation, regardless of what actions the government might take, which I think it's probably safe to say the scientists and engineers of this country certainly don't support?
Well, you know, there's so many projects that are underway. You know, there's so many scientists who are involved in collaboration at the moment. We know right across Europe, scientists are cooperating with Britain under the current Horizon programme, and that goes right through to the end of this year. And some of these programmes may be continued, I hope so. But I think each person who's involved in the Horizon programme ought to make the views known, and they don't need to argue it for Brexit or anti-Brexit reasons. They argue it for scientific reasons. Look, what COVID-19 has shown us is the power of science. You know, in the European referendum, as I said, the experts were being disparaged and they were being ridiculed. And Michael Gove, of course, famously said, we've had too much of experts, as I said at the beginning. But I think we know now the power of science, we know the power of innovation, we know the power to change the world through science. And I hope that the vocal community of scientists can make its what it thinks heard as soon as possible.
Thank you. And again, just to reiterate, if you do want to get more involved with this campaign or other issues, Joe will repost that link to hear more about us, either as a member or just to join our mailing list at the end of the call. Please do take that opportunity. We're almost out of time, so one more question from myself, actually. Gordon, we've obviously talked about the intersection between science and politics, and yourself as a former academic will, of course, experience that transition from academia through to the political way of life. For many scientists, it often seems as if engaging with science policy, engaging with politicians is a foreign concept, best left to coming from the political side rather than being pushed from the scientific side. What advice would you personally give to people on this call who are looking to get more engaged with political activity, with lobbying and making the case for science, both in the context of the European Union and more widely, based on perhaps your own experience of that transition?
Well, we had to make a decision when we were in government. We were struggling, of course, at some points for the public spending resources to meet our health programs, our education programs, our social security, our tax credit program. But we decided that science had to be a priority. If we were going to build for the future, and some countries have ministries for the future, we had to invest in science. So we doubled science investment in real terms. Lord Sainsbury, David Sainsbury, was Minister of Science and Innovation, and he not only increased the real amount, the real value of money going to science dramatically, but we made an agreement with, I mentioned them already, the Wellcome Trust to renovate the science labs of universities. We expanded technology transfer from universities into industry. And of course, we wanted to do more postgraduate science and encourage more research. So I don't think it's about what party you support. I think this is about all of us recognizing the power of science to change lives and the importance of investing in science for the future. And I do believe that while there are very powerful lobbies on this issue and that issue, I mean, some of the most powerful lobbies we had were the countryside lobby. We had powerful lobbies from sporting organizations. We had powerful lobbies, obviously, for and against Europe. And I would like to see a more powerful science constituency, where whatever your politics, you press for science and innovation to be given the investment it needs. And Scientists for Labour can play a part in doing this as you have, and many other scientific organizations who actually have involved themselves in this campaign to save Horizon and with it ERASMUS as well. As I mentioned, so many different organizations that sometimes you might not have expected to be involved in this public decision-making and public activity have got involved in this too. So I would urge any scientist and any prospective science and any student scientist to think that you have a role to play in shaping public opinion, in showing both the importance of science and the application of science. Because as I said in the remarks I made, so many of the changes that we're benefiting from now, so many of the improvements we've seen in the world have come from investment in science and collaboration and cooperation in science. And that will, in my view, be even more important. To quote John Kennedy, it's going to be far more important to our future as well.
Thank you very much, Gordon, for that thought, and indeed for all your contributions today. I'm afraid that's all we've got time for, but thank you very much for joining us. I hope you'll take the time to stay in touch and to find out more about the other events we have going on this week through the conference season. Thank you as well to those who've been doing technical support, Joe and to Paul for, and Henry for everything that they've done in facilitating this event and making it such an engaging and enlightening discussion. And once again, thank you very much to all of you for coming. Dr. Gordon Brown, a massive thank you, and we hope to stay in touch and stay engaged.
Thank you, and thanks to the audience.
Have a lovely evening.